Ethan Parker always felt more comfortable in silence. At 12 years old, his words were saved like rare coins that only left his pocket on special occasions. It wasn't shyness. It was a kind of inner tranquility that few understood. The move to the small town of Pinewood Valley had happened just 3 weeks ago. His father, David, a dedicated biologist, had accepted a position as a researcher at the newly created Animal Conservation Center in the region. His mother, Sarah, a literature teacher, had easily secured a transfer to the local school. For them, it was the perfect fresh start after years in the hustle of Chicago. For Ethan, it was an unknown world. The boys' room, on the second floor of the wooden house they now called home, had a window that opened onto a vast backyard that gradually merged with the beginning of the forest. From there, Ethan observed mornings being born, painting the sky with colors he had never seen in the big city. That particular afternoon, sitting at his light wooden desk, Ethan was absent-mindedly sketching. Outside, a fine drizzle covered the property with a silver veil. That's when an unusual movement caught his attention. At the boundary between the yard and the forest, something was moving with difficulty. Ethan squinted behind his round-framed glasses. It was a medium-sized dog, golden coat soaked by the rain. The animal was visibly limping, carefully putting weight on only 3 good legs. "Mom!" called Ethan, his voice echoing through the nearly empty house. It was the first word he had spoken since breakfast. Sarah appeared at the door, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. "What is it, honey?" "There's an injured dog down there." He pointed through the window. "It's limping." Sarah approached, observing the scene. The dog had lain down under a tree, sheltering from the increasing rain. "Your father should be home soon. Let's wait for him before doing anything, okay?" Ethan agreed with a nod, but his eyes never left the animal. Something about that solitary, wounded figure deeply touched a place inside him that also felt lost and out of place. When David finally arrived, he was greeted at the door by an anxious Ethan who, without words, pulled him by the sleeve of his shirt toward the back of the house. Sarah explained the situation as they followed the boy. Under the protection of umbrellas, the 3 approached the animal, which, upon noticing them, raised its head in alert. The dog didn't growl, but its brown eyes conveyed a mixture of fear and resignation. "Easy, buddy," murmured David, crouching at a safe distance. "Looks like he hurt his front paw. No collar or visible ID." "Can we help him?" asked Ethan, his voice almost a whisper. David looked at his son, surprised by the evident concern on his usually impassive face. "Yes, we can. I'll get a towel and try to bring him inside. Then we'll call the town vet." As David moved away, Ethan knelt in the damp earth, ignoring his mother's protests about his new pants. With slow movements, he extended his hand toward the animal, stopping halfway. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice as soft as the drizzle. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The dog observed the extended hand for a long moment. Then, to Sarah's surprise, it dragged itself a few inches closer and stretched its muzzle, sniffing the boy's fingers without touching them. When their gazes met, the animal's brown eyes and the boy's green eyes, something silent was communicated, a mutual understanding that transcended words. Ethan smiled, a small but genuine smile that rarely appeared on his face. "I think he likes you," Sarah commented, observing the scene tenderly. The boy didn't respond. He didn't need to. For the first time since they had moved, Ethan didn't feel like a stranger in Pinewood Valley. The veterinarian, Dr. Wilson, was a man of few words and efficient gestures. He examined the dog with gentle but firm hands, while Ethan watched each movement with absolute attention. "Nothing's broken," the doctor concluded after the examination, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "It's a mild sprain in the right front paw. With rest and some medication, it should improve in a few days." "Any idea who the owner might be?" asked David, who observed everything leaning against the doorframe of the makeshift consultation room in the Parkers' living room. The veterinarian shook his head. "No microchip, and I've never seen this dog around town." "Could be from a farm further out, or, Sarah encouraged. "Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for animals to be abandoned near the forest," Dr. Wilson completed with a tired sigh. "I'll ask around town, but if no one claims him in a few days..." Ethan's gaze instantly traveled from the adults to the dog lying on the improvised mat. The animal, as if sensing the look, raised its head and stared directly into the boy's eyes. "He can stay here until we find the owner," suggested David, exchanging a meaningful look with Sarah. Both had noticed how their son, normally so quiet and introverted, showed an unusual interest in the animal. After the veterinarian left, Ethan sat on the floor near the dog. Carefully, he offered a bowl of fresh water, which the animal accepted, drinking eagerly. "He needs a name," Ethan declared suddenly, surprising his parents. "At least while he's with us." Sarah and David exchanged surprised looks. It was rare for their son to initiate a conversation or express a desire so clearly. "Any suggestions?" asked his mother, sitting beside him. Ethan studied the animal for a long moment. The golden coat shone under the soft light of the room, despite still being a bit damp from the rain. "Sunny," he said finally. "Because he appeared like a ray of sunshine in the middle of the storm." David smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Sunny is a great name." That night, despite Sarah's polite protests about establishing boundaries from the beginning, Sunny slept in Ethan's room. The boy improvised a bed with old blankets next to his own bed, but in the middle of the night, the dog had found its way to the mattress, lying at the boy's feet. When the first ray of sunlight entered through the window, it found both deeply asleep, the boy with a hand lightly resting on the animal's golden fur, as if even in sleep he needed to ensure his new friend was still there. The following days established a routine. Ethan would wake up early, take care of Sunny's feeding, change his water, and check the bandage on the injured paw. Then he would sit on the back porch, reading or drawing, always with the dog serenely lying at his feet. David, observing this interaction from the window of his improvised office, commented to Sarah, "It's impressive how quickly they connected." Sarah smiled, a mixture of joy and concern in her gaze. "Yes, that's what worries me. What will happen if we find the owner? Or when we have to decide this dog's future?" David hugged his wife by the shoulders. "We'll deal with that when the time comes. For now, I'm happy seeing our son smile more in 1 week than he has in the past few months." On the 7th day, Sunny's paw was almost completely healed. The dog followed Ethan throughout the house and yard, always attentive to the boy's movements, as if guarding a precious treasure. That afternoon, Ethan sat under the tree where they had found Sunny, with an open book on his lap. The dog lay beside him, head resting on the boy's thigh. "You know," murmured Ethan, scratching behind the animal's ears, "before you came, I felt like I was lost, like no one could really see me or understand me." Sunny raised his eyes, fixing them on the boy's face with an almost human attention. "But you understand, don't you? You were lost too." The dog let out a soft whimper as if agreeing, and licked Ethan's hand. It was at that moment that his father's voice called from across the yard. Beside him stood a man Ethan didn't recognize, tall, middle-aged, with a straw hat partially shadowing his sun-wrinkled face. "Ethan," called David, waving for him to approach. "This is Mr. Thompson. He's from a farm on the outskirts of town." The boy's heart instantly accelerated. His fingers instinctively gripped Sunny's fur. "Mr. Thompson says he might have lost a dog similar to Sunny a few weeks ago," his father continued, a note of caution in his voice. Ethan felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. Mr. Thompson approached with slow steps, leaning on a dark wooden cane. His eyes, a faded blue weathered by time, studied Sunny with interest. "Looks a lot like my Duke," he commented, his voice hoarse and low. "He ran off during a storm almost a month ago, tore off his collar and bolted when the thunder started." Ethan remained motionless, one hand still on Sunny's fur, who stayed serenely by his side, showing no special reaction to the stranger's presence. "He doesn't seem to recognize you," David carefully observed. Mr. Thompson shrugged. "It's been a while, and these critters are smart. They know where the living's good." He turned to Ethan, attempting a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "He seems to like you, son." Ethan merely nodded, unable to formulate words with the knot that had formed in his throat. "Well," the man continued, "if it is Duke, I'm glad someone found him. I was starting to think a mountain lion got him." "How can we be sure it's your dog?" asked Sarah, who had joined them, placing a protective hand on her son's shoulder. "He has a birthmark," Mr. Thompson replied, "a little white spot on his belly, kind of star-shaped." Ethan's heart sank. Sunny had exactly that mark. He had noticed it on the 2nd day, while helping apply medicine to the injured paw. David gave his son a questioning look, who reluctantly nodded, confirming the information. "Well, it seems we've found the owner then," David concluded, a note of barely disguised disappointment in his voice. "If you want to check out the farm first, I don't mind," offered Mr. Thompson, apparently noticing the family's hesitation. "It's about 5 miles from here, heading west out of town." "Yes, I think that would be good," Sarah quickly replied, for Ethan to say goodbye properly. Can we come tomorrow? The man agreed, providing detailed instructions on how to reach the property. He arranged to wait for them the next morning and said goodbye with a casual wave. When Mr. Thompson drove away in his old pickup truck, a heavy silence fell over the Parker family. Ethan bent down, wrapping Sonny in a tight hug, hiding his face in the dog's golden fur. "Honey," Sarah began, crouching beside her son. "I know you're sad, but—" "He can't go," Ethan interrupted, his voice muffled against the dog's fur. "He doesn't want to go." "How do you know?" David gently asked. Ethan finally raised his face, eyes moist with contained tears. "I just know." Sonny would have reacted if he recognized that man. Sarah and David exchanged concerned looks. Both had noticed the same thing. "Son, we'll visit the farm tomorrow as planned," suggested Sarah. "If everything seems okay, and if it really is Mr. Thompson's dog, we need to return him." "And if everything's not okay?" Ethan asked, a spark of hope in his eyes. "Then we'll deal with it," David answered firmly. "We won't hand Sonny over to someone who won't take good care of him. That I promise." That night, Ethan could barely sleep. Sonny, sensing his restlessness, stayed awake too, occasionally licking the boy's hand as if to reassure him. "I don't want to lose you," Ethan whispered in the darkness. "I can't lose you." The dog let out a soft whimper and rested his muzzle on the boy's chest, his brown eyes shining in the dark. At dawn, the Parker family prepared for the visit to the farm. Ethan insisted on bringing Sonny in the back seat beside him, keeping a protective arm around the animal during the entire journey. The landscape gradually changed as they moved away from town. Trees became sparser, giving way to open fields dotted with isolated houses. The dirt road shook the car, causing David to reduce speed. "It's just after that curve, according to the directions," informed Sarah, consulting a small map she had drawn. As they turned, a medium-sized property was revealed. A simple two-story house painted in faded yellow, surrounded by land showing signs of neglect. The grass grew tall in various spots, and a partially broken fence delimited what appeared to be an abandoned vegetable garden. There were no other animals visible, nor the typical sounds of an active farm. Ethan felt Sonny stiffen beside him, the fur on his neck slightly raised. "I don't like this," murmured David, parking the car at a cautious distance from the house. Before they could decide their next step, the front door opened, and Mr. Thompson appeared on the porch, waving to them. "You folks got here early," he commented when they approached. Sonny firmly by Ethan's side, connected by a leash the boy held tightly. "I see you brought Duke." "Where are your other animals?" David asked directly. The man hesitated for an instant. "They're out back. Got some chickens and 2 other guard dogs." "May we see them?" insisted Sarah. Sure, Mr. Thompson agreed, although his expression slightly closed. "Come with me." As the man led them to the back of the property, Ethan noticed that Sonny walked increasingly reluctantly, tail down, eyes alert. That wasn't the body language of a dog returning home. It was that of an animal on alert. In the back, there was indeed a small chicken coop, with half a dozen skinny birds pecking at the dirt ground. In a distant corner, 2 medium-sized dogs were chained separately to stakes in the ground. They looked undernourished, their apathetic eyes only briefly rising to register the visitors. Ethan's heart tightened. He felt his father stiffen beside him. "Why are your dogs chained like that?" asked David, his voice controlled but firm. "They're working dogs, not pets," the man replied with indifference. "Duke stayed loose because he was good at keeping predators away from the chickens." Sarah approached Ethan, placing a hand on his shoulder. Sonny was now partially hidden behind the boy's legs. "Mr. Thompson," David began, straightening his shoulders, "we appreciate you receiving us, but I believe there's been a mistake." "What do you mean?" The man frowned. "This dog," David pointed to Sonny, "was found injured, possibly abandoned. He's formed a special bond with our son and clearly doesn't recognize this place as his home." "Are you saying you won't give me back my dog?" The man's voice took on a harsh tone. "We're saying," intervened Sarah firmly, "that if this is indeed your dog, we'd like to discuss the possibility of officially adopting him." Mr. Thompson looked from one face to another, assessing the situation. His gaze lingered on Ethan, who stared back with a silent determination rarely demonstrated. "Maybe we can come to an arrangement," the man finally said, his tone shifting to something more calculating. The morning sun was already scorching when Mr. Thompson led the family inside his house. The interior was as neglected as the exterior, old furniture covered by a thin layer of dust, faded curtains filtering the light that entered through grimy windows. Ethan kept Sonny close to him, fingers buried in the dog's golden fur, who remained alert, as if prepared to flee at the slightest sign of danger. "So," Mr. Thompson began, sitting heavily in a worn armchair, "you folks want to keep Duke." "Sonny," Ethan automatically corrected, his voice small but firm. It was the first word he had spoken since they arrived at the farm. The man shrugged. "Call him what you want. The point is, he's useful to me around the property. It doesn't seem like he was being well cared for," observed David, maintaining a controlled tone despite the indignation he felt, remembering the conditions of the other animals. "I take care of my animals my way," the man retorted. "They get food and shelter, which is more than many get around here." Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with her husband before intervening. "Mr. Thompson, we're new to the area, but my husband works at the Animal Conservation Center and has contacts with environmental enforcement and animal protection agencies." The man's expression hardened for an instant before being replaced by a forced smile. "I'm not suggesting anything," he said, raising his hands in a defensive gesture. "I just think that since you're interested in the dog, maybe we can come to a fair price." Ethan felt a wave of relief. The man was giving up Sonny. He was willing to negotiate. "How much do you have in mind?" asked David. "Well, a trained dog like him is worth a good $500, replied Mr. Thompson, studying the family's reactions. "But since you already cared for him when he was hurt, I can do $400. Sarah and David exchanged glances. The value seemed inflated for a dog without pedigree, who probably hadn't received real training. But this wasn't the time to haggle, not with Ethan anxiously watching, clinging to Sonny as if his life depended on it. $150, David offered nonetheless, "and we formally assume responsibility for the animal, with all necessary documents." The man laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "$150 doesn't even cover the time I invested in him. $300, and we don't speak of it again." The silent impasse that followed was interrupted by Ethan's unexpected voice. "What if we helped your other dogs too?" All the adults turned to stare at him, surprised by the intervention. "What do you mean, boy?" asked Mr. Thompson, frowning. Ethan took a deep breath, gathering courage. "My dad works with animals. He can help improve where your other dogs live, get better food, maybe even find homes for them if you don't want them anymore." David looked at his son with a mixture of surprise and pride. It was the longest speech he had heard him make in front of strangers in a long time. "Ethan's right," he agreed, turning to the man. "I can provide veterinary assistance for your animals, guidance on proper handling, and if you prefer, help find new families for them." "And why would I want to get rid of my guard dogs?" questioned Mr. Thompson, although his tone was no longer so confrontational. "Because they deserve more than chains and scarce food," Sarah replied calmly, but firmly. "And because I'm sure you'd also like to avoid potential problems with animal protection authorities." The man studied the three for a long moment, his gaze lingering on Ethan, who maintained eye contact with silent determination. $250 for the dog, he finally decided, "and you can bring that veterinarian to take a look at the others." David extended his hand. $200 complete veterinary assistance for your animals, and our word that Sonny will have a loving home for the rest of his life. After a moment of hesitation, Mr. Thompson shook the offered hand. Deal. On the return journey, the atmosphere inside the car was completely different. Ethan smiled, hugging Sonny in the back seat, while the dog, seeming to understand the outcome of the situation, rested peacefully with his head on the boy's lap. "I'm proud of you, son," said Sarah, turning in the front seat to face him. "You were very brave and compassionate today." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining in a way his parents hadn't seen in a long time. "Sonny taught me," he replied simply. "He didn't give up when he was hurt and alone. I couldn't give up on him either." David observed his son in the rearview mirror, noticing the subtle but significant transformation in his posture, in his gaze, in the confidence with which he now expressed himself. "You know," he commented, "I think you two were meant to find each other." Ethan nodded, as if this were an obvious truth he had always known. His fingers gently caressed Sonny's ears, who sighed contentedly. "Dad," he called after a few minutes, "can we really help those other dogs at the farm?" "Of course we can," David assured. "Actually, I was thinking of calling Jessica from the shelter as soon as we get home. She has experience rehabilitating animals in difficult situations." "What about Mr. Thompson?" asked Ethan, a shadow of concern passing over his face. "Do you think he'll take better care of the animals now?" Sarah and David exchanged quick glances. "We'll make sure he does," Sarah answered firmly. "Your father will visit him regularly with the vet, and if he doesn't improve the conditions, there are agencies that can intervene." Ethan seemed satisfied with the response. He turned his attention back to Sonny, who now slept peacefully, confident in his safety. "He'll never be alone or afraid again," the boy promised, in a quiet but determined voice. Never again. The following weeks brought subtle but profound changes to the Parker family's routine. The most notable was Ethan's gradual transformation. The boy, who previously spent hours isolated in his room, now enthusiastically explored the property's surroundings, always with Sonny by his side like a faithful golden shadow. On a particularly sunny morning, Sarah watched through the kitchen window while preparing breakfast. Ethan was running around the yard, throwing a ball that Sonny chased with youthful enthusiasm. Her son's laughter echoed across the property, a sound that had become surprisingly common in recent weeks. "Looks like we have a miracle happening out there," commented David, hugging her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. Sarah smiled, leaning back against her husband. "Sonny is the best therapy Ethan could have." "It's more than that," observed David. "It's a friendship that's teaching our son to open up again." After breakfast, while Ethan helped clear the table, David made an announcement. "I've been thinking, the Conservation Center is organizing a program for young volunteers during summer vacation. It would be an opportunity to meet other animals and maybe make some friends your age. What do you think?" Ethan hesitated, looking first at his father, then at his mother, and finally at Sonny, who sat obediently beside his chair. "Would Sonny be able to come too?" he asked cautiously. David smiled. "We'd have to check the program rules, but I'm sure we can work something out. Dr. Reynolds, the program coordinator, has a therapy dog herself. She understands the importance of these connections." To Sarah and David's surprise and delight, Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "I'd like to try." The following Saturday, the family drove to the Conservation Center for an introductory visit. Sonny sat in the back seat beside Ethan, his head occasionally poking out the window, golden ears flapping in the wind. The center was larger than Ethan had imagined, a modern building with large glass windows surrounded by extensive grounds where various enclosed areas housed animals in rehabilitation. A sign at the entrance proudly proclaimed, "Pinewood Valley Conservation Center, healing nature, one life at a time." Dr. Catherine Reynolds, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair, greeted them at the entrance. At her side was a German shepherd with wise eyes and a calm demeanor. "This is Maya," she introduced the dog to Ethan. "She's my partner in the therapy programs we run here." Ethan knelt to greet Maya, who approached with dignified curiosity. Sonny, remaining close to the boy, exchanged a polite sniff with the older dog. "And this must be Sonny, Doctor." Reynolds smiled, observing the interaction. "Your father has told me a lot about him. He found me when I was lost," Ethan explained simply, surprising his parents with his openness to a stranger. Dr. Reynolds nodded understandingly. "The best friendships often begin that way. Now, would you like to see some of the animals we're currently helping?" For the next hour, they toured the facility. Ethan listened attentively as Dr. Reynolds explained each case. A hawk with a damaged wing, 2 orphaned fawns being raised until they could be released, a fox recovering from a leg injury. At each stop, the boy asked thoughtful questions that impressed both the doctor and his parents. His natural empathy for the animals was evident in the way he approached each enclosure, respectfully, without sudden movements, his voice soft and calm. "He has a gift, Doctor." Reynolds commented quietly to David and Sarah, while Ethan observed a young raccoon from a safe distance. "Not everyone has that natural connection with animals." "It's new for us too," admitted Sarah. "Before Sonny, he was so withdrawn, so sometimes all it takes is one connection to open the door to many others," the doctor observed wisely. Sonny was that connection for Ethan. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Reynolds handed Ethan a folder with information about the summer program. "We start in 2 weeks," she told him. "There will be 5 other kids around your age. You'll learn about animal care, conservation, and even help with some of the simpler rehabilitation tasks." "Thank you," Ethan replied sincerely. "I'd really like to be part of it." On the drive home, the boy carefully read through the program materials, occasionally whispering parts to Sonny, who listened with head tilted attentively. "This feels right," David commented quietly to Sarah as he drove. "It's exactly what Ethan needs." "Both of them," Sarah corrected, glancing back at their son and the dog who had changed their lives so profoundly. That night, as Ethan got ready for bed, Sarah overheard him talking softly to Sunny. "We're going to help other animals just like people helped you. And maybe I'll make some friends too." Sarah smiled to herself, quietly backing away from the door. Her son was emerging from his shell, one gentle step at a time, guided by the love of a golden dog who had wandered into their lives at exactly the right moment. The first day of the summer program arrived with a mix of sunshine and scattered clouds, a perfect mirror of Ethan's emotions. Excitement and anxiety battled within him as he carefully packed his backpack with the items on Dr. Reynolds' list: a water bottle, sunscreen, a small notebook, and a light lunch. "You ready, buddy?" asked David, appearing at the bedroom door. Ethan nodded, though his hands fidgeted nervously with the straps of his backpack. Sunny, sensing his friend's unease, pressed against the boy's leg comfortingly. "Remember, I'll be there too," David reassured him. "I'm just in a different part of the center, and Dr. Reynolds said Sunny can stay with you for the orientation today." The drive to the conservation center was mostly silent, with Ethan staring out the window, mentally rehearsing what he might say to the other kids. It had been so long since he'd had to make new friends that the prospect seemed almost as daunting as climbing a mountain. When they arrived, a small group was already gathered on the front lawn, 5 children around Ethan's age and Dr. Reynolds, who waved warmly when she spotted their car. "Deep breath," Sarah said gently, turning to face her son. "Just be yourself. The rest will follow naturally." Ethan nodded, gathering his courage. With Sunny close by his side, he stepped out of the car and approached the group. "Everyone, this is Ethan and his companion Sunny," Dr. Reynolds introduced them. "Ethan, meet Lily, Marcus, Emma, Jason, and Zoe." A chorus of hellos followed, along with curious glances at Sunny, who maintained his dignified posture while assessing the new humans. "Is that your dog?" asked Zoe, a freckle-faced girl with braided red hair. "He's beautiful." "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice quiet but steady. "We found each other a little over a month ago. Can I pet him?" she asked, already extending her hand cautiously. Ethan nodded, a small smile appearing on his face as Zoe gently stroked Sunny's golden head. "Okay, young conservationists," Dr. Reynolds called, clapping her hands together. "Let's start our tour and orientation. Today we'll visit each area of the center and learn about the work we do here." As the group moved from one area to another, Ethan gradually felt his nervousness ebbing. The other kids asked questions, made jokes, and generally behaved like, well, normal kids. No one seemed to mind his initial quietness, and when he did speak up to ask a question about a recovering eagle they were observing, no one acted like it was unusual. During lunch break, the children sat at a picnic table under a large oak tree. To Ethan's surprise, Jason, a tall boy with dark curly hair, sat next to him. "So, how did you find Sunny?" he asked, unwrapping his sandwich. With Sunny lying contentedly at his feet, Ethan found himself telling the story, how the dog had appeared injured in their backyard, how they had nursed him back to health, and even the tense encounter with Mr. Thompson. "Whoa, that's like a movie," exclaimed Lily, who had been listening from across the table. "You totally saved him." "He saved me too," Ethan admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "I didn't really talk much before. I mean, I was kind of shy," offered Emma kindly. "I used to be super shy too. Then my parents got me involved in the local theater group last year. It was terrifying at first, but it helped a lot." "Yeah, and I used to be afraid of every animal," added Marcus. "Then my aunt, who works at a zoo, started bringing me behind the scenes. Now I want to be a veterinarian." As the conversation flowed around him, Ethan felt something warm blossoming in his chest, a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in a very long time. These kids didn't know about his past struggles, didn't have any preconceived notions about him. Here, he could simply be Ethan, the boy with the golden dog and a passion for animals. When Dr. Reynolds gathered them for the afternoon activities, she divided them into pairs for a scavenger hunt, designed to teach them about local wildlife. Ethan was paired with Zoe, who immediately grabbed his hand with enthusiastic camaraderie. "We're going to ace this," she declared confidently. "With Sunny's nose and my awesome observation skills, we can't lose." For the next hour, the pairs scattered across the center's educational trail, searching for items on their list and answering questions about the animals they represented. Sunny trotted alongside Ethan and Zoe, occasionally sniffing out hidden markers that helped them find the next clue. To Ethan's amazement, he and Zoe worked seamlessly together. her outgoing energy balancing his thoughtful approach. When they returned to the meeting point, they had found every item on their list, tied with Marcus and Emma for first place. "Great job, everyone," praised Dr. Reynolds as they all gathered again. "You've shown excellent teamwork and observation skills today. Tomorrow we'll start learning about animal care routines and assistance in rehabilitation." As the program was wrapping up for the day, Jason approached Ethan again. "Hey, a bunch of us go to the town swimming hole on Saturdays. You should come this weekend. You can bring Sunny too. Lots of dogs play there." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Really? That sounds fun. Cool. Give me your number and I'll text you the details." By the time Sarah arrived to pick him up, Ethan was standing with the entire group, laughing at something Marcus had said. Sunny sat among them, accepting pets and attention from all the children as if he'd known them forever. "How was it?" Sarah asked as they drove home, already knowing the answer from the animated way Ethan recounted every detail of the day. "It was great," he replied, a new energy in his voice. "They all liked Sunny, and we're doing a project on wildlife rehabilitation tomorrow, and Jason invited me to go swimming on Saturday with everyone." Sarah caught David's eye in the rearview mirror, sharing a silent moment of joy at their son's transformation. "And the best part," Ethan continued, "is that Dr. Reynolds said Sunny can come every day as my assistant if I want. She says he has a calming effect on the rehabilitation animals." As they arrived home, Ethan raced to his room to find his swimming trunks, already planning for Saturday's outing. Sunny followed, matching the boys' newfound enthusiasm, step for step. "I never imagined we'd see this day," Sarah whispered to David, watching their son's animated movements through the house. "It's like he's finally waking up." David wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "All because of a golden dog who limped into our lives at exactly the right moment." In his room, Ethan sat on the floor beside Sunny, arms wrapped around the dog's neck in a gentle hug. "Thank you," he whispered into the golden fur, "for finding me, for helping me find myself again." Sunny responded with a gentle lick to Ethan's cheek, his brown eyes seeming to say, "I'll always be here for you." That night, Ethan fell asleep with a smile on his face, his dreams filled not with the isolation and uncertainty that had plagued him since the move, but with new friends, swimming holes, and adventures yet to come. Summer unfolded like a flower in bloom. Each day at the Conservation Center brought new knowledge, challenges, and deepening friendships. Ethan, once the quietest member of the group, now contributed regularly to discussions and even took the lead during some of the animal care activities. Dr. Reynolds often observed him with quiet approval, especially noting his gentle approach with the more traumatized animals. "He has healing hands," she commented to David one afternoon. "The injured fox that wouldn't let anyone near finally accepted food from him yesterday." July brought a heat wave to Pinewood Valley. The temperatures soared, making the afternoon sessions at the center challenging despite the air conditioning in the main building. On one particularly sweltering Friday, Dr. Reynolds announced a special treat. "Since we've all been working so hard and it's too hot for our regular activities," she told the eager group, "we're going on a field trip Monday to Collins Creek. We'll learn about water ecosystems and maybe cool off a bit in the process." The children cheered, already excited about the prospect of escaping the heat. "Can we bring our dogs?" asked Ethan, thinking of Sunny, who had become the unofficial mascot of their summer program. "Absolutely," Dr. Reynolds nodded. "It's dog-friendly. Just make sure they're on leashes when we're doing our ecosystem study." That weekend, the swimming hole outing that had become a regular event for Ethan and his new friends took on an added element of excitement as they discussed the upcoming field trip. "Collins Creek has the best shallow rapids," Jason told Ethan as they watched Sunny splash joyfully with other dogs in the town's swimming spot. "Perfect for dogs to play in. My sister says there are tadpoles everywhere right now," added Lily, floating on her back in the cool water. "We can study the life cycle of frogs in real time." Ethan smiled, absorbing his friend's enthusiasm and adding it to his own. These Saturday outings had become the highlight of his week, a time when he felt completely accepted, his earlier silence forgotten in the easy camaraderie they'd developed. By Monday morning, however, the weather had shifted dramatically. Dark clouds hung low in the sky and a steady drizzle fell as Ethan and Sunny waited on the porch for David's car to warm up. "Maybe they'll cancel," Sarah suggested, handing Ethan a raincoat. "It doesn't look like a good day for a creek visit." "Dr. Reynolds said a little rain won't stop us," Ethan replied confidently. "We're studying nature, Mom. Nature includes rain." Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair affectionately. When did you become so philosophical? Despite the gloomy weather, all 6 children and 3 dogs, Sunny, Zoe's border collie named Pepper, and Dr. Reynolds' Maya, were present and accounted for when they arrived at the conservation center. They piled into the center's van, excited despite the weather. The creek is only about 20 minutes away, Dr. Reynolds explained as they drove. The rain is expected to lighten up by midday, and we'll have lunch under the pavilion there. As predicted, the rain had diminished to a fine mist by the time they reached Collins Creek. The water flowed clear and swift, slightly higher than normal due to the recent rain, but still safe for their planned activities. Dr. Reynolds led them to a shallow section where the creek widened, perfect for their ecosystem study. The children, equipped with rubber boots, small nets and collection jars, spread out along the bank, eagerly searching for aquatic insects, small fish, and plant specimens. Ethan and Sunny worked as a team, the boy carefully turning over rocks in the shallows, while the dog sat patiently nearby, occasionally alerting him to movement in the water with a soft whine. "Look what I found," Ethan called to Zoe, who was working nearby. He held up a small crayfish in his collection jar. The morning passed quickly as the children catalogued their findings, comparing notes and listening to Dr. Reynolds' explanations about the delicate balance of creek ecosystems. By lunchtime, the clouds had broken, allowing patches of sunlight to warm the landscape. After eating their sandwiches in the rustic pavilion, Dr. Reynolds allowed some free time. "You can explore, but stay within eyesight," she instructed. "And keep your partners with you at all times." Ethan, Jason, and Zoe decided to follow the creek upstream, where Jason had spotted what looked like a small waterfall. Sunny, Pepper, and Maya accompanied them, the dogs delighting in the chance to splash through the shallow edges of the water. "It should be just around this bend," Jason said, pointing ahead where the creek curved between 2 rocky outcroppings. As they rounded the corner, they saw the waterfall, a gentle cascade where the creek dropped about 3 feet over a ledge of smooth rocks. It was beautiful, sunlight catching the spray and creating tiny rainbows. "Let's go closer," Zoe suggested, already picking her way across some stepping stones. Ethan followed more cautiously, keeping an eye on Sunny, who navigated the slippery rocks with surprising grace. They reached a small pebbly beach directly across from the waterfall, the perfect spot to admire the natural beauty. That's when they heard it. A distant rumble like thunder, but continuous and growing louder. Dr. Reynolds' voice suddenly cut through the air, urgent and commanding. "Children, dogs, back to the pavilion now!" The 3 kids looked at each other in confusion, but the seriousness in her voice propelled them into immediate action. They turned to retrace their steps, but the stepping stones they had used to cross were already disappearing under rapidly rising water. "Flash flood," Jason exclaimed, understanding dawning on his face. The rain upstream must have been heavier. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly replaced by a strange calm. He looked at Sunny, who stood alert, sensing the danger. "This way," Ethan said firmly, pointing to a path that led up the bank rather than back across the now submerged stepping stones. "We need to get to higher ground first." Zoe and Jason followed without question, gathering the dogs close as they scrambled up the increasingly muddy incline. The rumbling grew louder, and when they looked back, they saw the creek, once clear and gentle, now a churning brown torrent carrying branches and debris. As they reached a safer elevation, Dr. Reynolds appeared on the opposite bank with Marcus, Emma, and Lily. "Stay where you are," she called across the roaring water. "Don't try to cross. Follow the high path parallel to the creek. It will lead back to the parking lot." Ethan took charge naturally, surprising even himself. "Zoe, hold Pepper's leash tightly. Jason, you lead the way since you know the creek better. I'll bring up the rear with Sunny and Maya." The group moved carefully along the narrow path that hugged the hillside above the swollen creek. The dogs, sensing the gravity of the situation, stayed close and alert, with Maya occasionally looking back as if to check that everyone was following. Despite their care, the path was becoming increasingly treacherous. The earlier rain had softened the earth, and in places it crumbled under their feet. They had gone about halfway back when disaster struck. A section of the path ahead of Jason suddenly gave way. He leapt forward in time, but the collapse created a gap about 4 feet wide, too far to jump safely given the steep drop to the churning water below. "What do we do now?" Zoe asked, her voice tight with fear. Ethan scanned their surroundings, thinking quickly. About 20 feet up the hillside, he spotted a more solid path, likely a game trail. "We need to climb up to that higher trail," he decided, pointing. "It looks more stable." Carefully, they began to ascend, helping each other on the slippery slope. The dogs followed, with Sunny staying particularly close to Ethan, as if offering moral support. They had almost reached the upper path when Zoe slipped, losing her grip on Pepper's leash. The border collie, startled, darted a few feet away, stopping precariously close to the edge, where the ground dropped sharply toward the flood. "Pepper, stay!" Zoe called desperately, trying to regain her footing. The dog froze, confused and frightened. The ground beneath her paws began to crumble. Without hesitation, Ethan whispered a command to Sunny. "Go." The golden dog sprang forward with purpose, reaching Pepper just as the ground started to give way. With gentle but firm precision, Sunny gripped the collie's collar in his teeth and pulled her back from the edge, guiding her towards safer ground. Ethan rushed forward, securing both dogs while helping Zoe to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked, his heart pounding. She nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face as she hugged Pepper tightly. "Thank you." "Thanks, Sunny." Jason, who had watched the scene unfold with wide eyes, clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "That was amazing. How did you teach Sunny to do that?" "I didn't," Ethan replied simply. "He just knows what to do. He always has." The higher path proved more stable, and within 20 minutes they reached the parking lot where Dr. Reynolds and the other children were anxiously waiting with park rangers who had been alerted to the emergency. The reunion was emotional, hugs, relief, and excited recounting of their adventure. Dr. Reynolds checked each child and dog for injuries, finding only minor scratches and muddy clothes. "You showed exceptional judgment," she told Ethan privately, as the rangers prepared to escort them back to the center. Staying calm, finding the higher path, working with the dogs instead of panicking, those are skills many adults don't have. Ethan blushed slightly at the praise, one hand resting on Sunny's head. "I just did what felt right. Sometimes that's all heroism is," she replied with a smile, "doing what feels right when it matters most." The Collins Creek adventure became legendary among the summer program participants. The local newspaper even ran a small story about it, featuring a photo of Ethan, Sunny, Zoe, and Pepper. "Quick thinking and canine courage saved the day," read the headline. For Ethan, the experience marked a profound turning point. The quiet, withdrawn boy who had arrived in Pinewood Valley just a few months earlier had transformed into someone confident, capable, and connected, not just to Sunny, but to a community that now recognized and valued him. As July turned to August and the summer program entered its final weeks, Dr. Reynolds approached Ethan during their lunch break. "I have a proposition for you," she said, sitting beside him under the oak tree where the children gathered daily. "How would you feel about continuing to work with us on weekends during the school year?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Really? Doing what?" "We're starting a youth mentor program for our weekend visitors," she explained. "Children from surrounding communities who might not otherwise have the opportunity to connect with nature and animals. I think you'd be perfect as one of our first youth ambassadors." "Me?" Ethan asked, genuinely surprised. "Why me?" Dr. Reynolds smiled warmly. "Because you understand something many people never learn, that healing often comes through connection, and sometimes the most profound connections happen without words." Her gaze moved to Sunny, who lay contentedly at Ethan's feet. "You and Sunny demonstrate that every day. That's a powerful lesson for children who might be struggling in their own ways." Overwhelmed with emotion, Ethan could only nod at first. Finally, he found his voice. "I'd be honored. We both would." That evening, as the Parker family sat on their back porch watching the sunset, Ethan shared the news. "Dr. Reynolds wants me to be a youth ambassador on weekends," he explained, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Sunny too." "That's wonderful, honey," Sarah exclaimed, exchanging a look of joy with David. "You've come so far this summer. We're incredibly proud of you," David added, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan looked out across the yard to the edge of the forest, where just a few months ago, a limping golden dog had appeared and changed his life forever. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "about what happened with Mr. Thompson's other dogs." David nodded encouragingly. "The shelter found homes for both of them last week. They're doing much better now." "What if we could do more?" Ethan suggested, turning to face his parents. "What if we could help more dogs like them?" "And Sunny? What do you have in mind?" Sarah asked, intrigued by the thoughtful expression on her son's face. "Maybe a rescue network?" Ethan proposed. something that connects the conservation center, the shelter, and local veterinarians for animals that need special help or understanding. David and Sarah exchanged surprised glances at their son's ambitious vision. "That's a big undertaking," David said carefully, "but not impossible. We could start small, maybe a foster network for animals that need socialization or recovery time before being adoptable." "The golden connection," Ethan said suddenly, his face lighting up. "That's what we could call it. Because that's what Sunny was for me. A golden connection back to myself, to others." Sarah's eyes glistened with tears as she reached out to squeeze her son's hand. "I think it's perfect." Over the next few months, the idea took shape. Dr. Reynolds enthusiastically supported the initiative, offering space at the Conservation Center for training and education. The local animal shelter partnered to identify animals that would benefit from the program. Several veterinarians, including Dr. Wilson, volunteered their services. By winter, the Golden Connection had placed its first 3 dogs in foster homes, all success stories that echoed Ethan and Sunny's journey in different ways. On a crisp December day, Ethan stood before a small gathering at the Conservation Center's holiday open house. Beside him, Sunny sat proudly, his golden coat gleaming in the winter sunlight streaming through the windows. "6 months ago," Ethan began, his voice clear and confident despite the crowd, "I was lost. Not physically, but inside. I had trouble connecting, speaking, believing I belonged anywhere." He reached down to touch Sunny's head gently. "Then this amazing dog limped into my life. He was injured, alone, afraid, but still willing to trust, still capable of love." Looking out at the faces watching him, his parents, his summer program friends, Dr. Reynolds, volunteers from the Golden Connection, Ethan continued with growing passion. "What I've learned is that sometimes healing doesn't happen in hospitals or therapy rooms. Sometimes it happens in the quiet moments of connection, when someone or something sees you, truly sees you, even when you're at your most broken and afraid." Sunny leaned against his leg supportively, and Ethan smiled down at him. The Golden Connection isn't just about rescuing animals, it's about creating spaces where healing connections can happen for both humans and animals, where we recognize that sometimes the ones who have been hurt the most have the most love to give. After the presentation, as people mingled and admired the photo display of successful adoptions, Zoe approached Ethan with Pepper trotting beside her. "That was amazing," she said, giving him a quick hug. "Remember when you barely said 2 words at our first meeting? Now look at you, making speeches and running a rescue network." Ethan laughed, a free and easy sound. "I had a good teacher," he replied, nodding towards Sunny. As the afternoon waned, Ethan found a quiet moment alone with Sunny in the center's garden. Snow had begun to fall gently, dusting the golden dog's fur with delicate white flakes. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ethan murmured, kneeling to meet Sunny's gaze. "From strangers in the rain to this." Sunny responded by pressing his forehead against Ethan's, a gesture of perfect understanding and affection. In that silent communion, Ethan felt the truth that had shaped his journey. Sometimes the deepest healing comes not through grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but through the simple, profound miracle of being truly seen and accepted by another living being. As they walked back inside together, boy and dog, rescuer and rescued, each having saved the other in their own way, Ethan knew with certainty that whatever challenges life might bring, he would face them with an open heart and the courage that Sunny had taught him. For in the end, that was the most precious gift his golden friend had given him, not just companionship, but the knowledge that even in our most broken moments, we are worthy of love, capable of connection, and never truly alone. My friends, we've come to the end of the story. Did you like it? What lesson can you bring to life from this story? Leave it here in the comments. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and watch this video that's playing on your screen. This story will impact you. See you next time.